Welcome back to the Estate of Grace Wellbeing podcast. Hi, I'm Grace, your host, and I'm a mindful living and wellbeing coach for women. And for nearly a decade, I have been finding ways to soften out of survival mode and return to myself through mindfulness, nervous system regulation, and practices that support deep, sustainable well-being. Today, I want to talk about something that many women quietly feel, but don't always have words for. The feeling that life has become full, too full. Not necessarily bad, not necessarily falling apart, just crowded. Crowded with responsibilities, mental lists, emotional labour, noise, pressure, expectations, and the constant feeling that you need to keep going because everybody depends on you. And somewhere inside all of that, you begin to lose the feeling of yourself. Not completely, just enough to notice, enough to realise that you haven't truly exhaled in a very long time. So today's episode is called Creating Space for the Woman You Are Becoming. Because I believe many women reach a point where the soul begins asking for more space, long before the mind gives permission for it. Not more productivity, not more goals, not another thing to optimize, but space. Space to think clearly, space to rest deeply, space to hear your own voice again, space to become. And becoming is such an interesting word, isn't it? Because we often imagine becoming as something dramatic, a reinvention, a huge life change, a bold declaration. But I don't think that's usually how it happens. I think becoming often arrives quietly, like the first tiny crack of light under a door, a subtle awareness that something old no longer fits. The pace no longer fits, the constant pleasing no longer fits, the endless self-abandonment no longer fits, and perhaps, for the first time, you start wondering, what would my life feel like if I stopped forcing myself to carry everything? Not abandon everything, not run away from life, but soften your grip. I think many women have been extraordinarily skilled at surviving overloaded lives. We become efficient, capable, reliable, needed. We learn how to keep functioning even when emotionally exhausted, and sometimes the world applauds us for it. But there's a hidden cost to always holding everything together. Eventually, the nervous system begins whispering for change, sometimes through anxiety, sometimes through fatigue, sometimes through emotional numbness, sometimes through resentment or overwhelm, and sometimes through a quiet ache that says, there has been another way to live. I've spoken to so many women who tell me they don't even know what they enjoy anymore. They've spent years responding to everybody else's needs, that they've lost connection with their own inner rhythm. And I understand that deeply, because creating space can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to earning your worth through doing. Stillness can initially feel unfamiliar, even unsafe. The moment the external noise quietens, the internal noise often gets louder. Thoughts you've been outrunning begin catching up. Emotions you've postponed begin tapping gently at the door, and yet this is often where healing begins. Not in fixing yourself, but in finally hearing yourself. Mindfulness teaches us something incredibly important, that we do not have to solve our entire lives in one moment. We simply begin by noticing where we feel tight, noticing what drains us, noticing where we override ourselves, noticing what brings us back to life. And this is why creating space matters so much, because without space, we cannot hear our inner knowing. If every moment is filled with noise, rushing, scrolling, fixing, talking, reacting, producing, there's no room for deeper wisdom to emerge. A deeper wisdom rarely shouts. It whispers very softly, sometimes through the body, sometimes through intuition, sometimes through exhaustion, and sometimes through longing. Longing for simplicity, longing for calm, longing for meaning, longing to feel present in your own life instead of constantly racing through it. I think many women are standing in a strange in-between season right now, no longer fully identifying with who they used to be, but not entirely sure who they are becoming either. And that space in the middle can feel tender, because the old identity may have been built around being needed, being productive, being the strong one, being endlessly available. But the woman emerging underneath those roles may desire something very different. More peace, more honesty, more softness, more alignment, more depth. And perhaps the most courageous thing we can do is allow ourselves to evolve without apologizing for it, without needing everybody else to understand. Because growth sometimes disappoints expectations. Not because you're wrong, but because you're changing. And change can unsettle people who benefited from the older version of you. The version who said yes to everything, the version who carried everybody emotionally, the version who abandoned herself to keep the peace. But eventually, the soul grows tired of living in ways that require self-betrayal. And this is where spaciousness becomes sacred. Not empty, sacred. Because space allows integration. It allows the nervous system to regulate. It allows emotions to move. It allows clarity to surface naturally rather than being forced. Think about nature for a moment. Nothing in nature blooms constantly. There are pauses, seasons, stillness, wintering, and yet, somehow, as humans, we often expect ourselves to remain permanently productive without consequences, especially women. But we were never designed to live disconnected from our own rhythms. And this is why mindfulness can feel so profound. Not because it instantly removes every challenge, but because it gently returns us to ourselves, one breath at a time, one pause at a time, one moment of awareness at a time. Sometimes creating space looks very practical. Turning off your phone earlier, sitting outside with a cup of tea in silence, not filling every gap in your calendar, allowing yourself to rest without earning it first. And sometimes it's emotional, letting go of guilt, letting go of stories, letting go of the pressure to constantly prove your value. I think many women are deeply tired of performing wellness while secretly feeling depleted. And what we truly crave is permission to simply be human, to not have to have it all figured out, to not constantly push through, to stop creating rest like a reward we must earn through exhaustion. Because here's the truth. The woman you are becoming cannot fully emerge in a life with no room for her. If every part of your life is already overflowing, there is nowhere for the new version of you to land. And that's why spaciousness matters. Not because you're lazy, not because you're failing, but because growth needs room. Healing needs room. Creativity needs room. Breathing needs room. You need room. And maybe today's episode is simply an invitation to ask yourself, where in my life am I overcrowded? What am I carrying that no longer belongs to me? And what would soften if I stopped forcing everything? And what might become possible if I trusted that I don't need to fill every moment in order to be worthy? You do not need to become somebody entirely new. Perhaps you are simply remembering who you were before the world taught you to abandon yourself. And that remembering, that gentle return, may be one of the most important journeys of your life. Thank you for being here with me today. And if this episode resonated with you, my self-paced 21 days of mindfulness for women's well-being is available now through the Estate of Grace Wellbeing website. It's a gentle, guided journey designed to help women create more calm, clarity, spaciousness, and reconnection within themselves through mindfulness, meditation, and reflection. Until next time, take a breath, soften where you can, and trust that creating space is not falling behind. It may actually be the beginning of coming home to yourself.